So Eric Dubay chimed in.
When I was little, my father was famous. He was the greatest samurai in the empire. He cut off the heads of 131 lords.
Hey everybody, Jerry Williams, aka Greater Sapien here. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, today I'm going to have a bit of fun. Now, not the same kind of fun I had making that War of the World style radio play the other day, which, by the way, you can see a full behind-the-scenes version of me performing that radio play, voices, sound effects, and all, on my new channel, Free Time with Greater Sapien. It has absolutely 0 subscribers and just went up and will be a much more lighthearted spot than this one. The link is in the description. No, today's fun will come from the viewing of some of the reactions I've seen pop up on my various feeds since the final experiment slammed the door in the face of flat earthers. Well, that's what I originally thought when I started writing this script. I was going to pull up this tweet from someone whom I mentioned in a previous video who doesn't understand how white balance affects apparent colors in photos and videos, and this one that shows a lack of understanding of how perspective works, and maybe this one that doesn't understand that you can have the same or similar mountain range in the background of footage and still be in a very different location. But as I was writing this, someone commented to me that Dubay had already debunked the final experiment, so I had to grab that video. So let's look at it. Now, just as a disclaimer, I will be zipping through and not responding to any of his usual hyperbolic, flourishes. So Dubay starts off saying the final experiment just happened and the globe folks claim to have dealt a death blow to flat Earth. He asks, did they measure the globe's curvature? Did they film a convex horizon without a fisheye lens? Did they travel in a perfectly straight line until they return to the starting point or make a model of water sticking to a spinning ball? Apparently, from the art, they think the Pacific Ocean is 200 miles deep, by the way. He says no, they didn't do that. They made up their own straw man.
Instead, they made up their own straw man experiment and labeled it final.
Now, in order for the 24-hour sun in Antarctica to be a straw man, flat earthers need to have not made an issue out of it. People like the late Antonio Subirats.
To see the sun actually around, that it would have stuck in your memory. It would have, I'm sure.
Or the held back Nathan Oakley.
So you saw it rise and set, and just once more, just show exactly what you saw it do.
That kind of thing, definitely.
Or maybe even people like Eric Dubay.
In order to fit the heliocentric globe model, this midnight sun phenomenon must also occur for observers south of the Antarctic Circle during winter solstice. Depending how far south the observer is, the sun should be seen for several days or weeks, never fully setting, just like it does in the north. In reality, however, there is never 24-hour sunlight anywhere in Antarctica at any time of year.
In order to fit the globe model, the midnight sun must occur, he says. But there never is, he says. That's a direct and absolute claim. There is never, he says. And to all the globe deniers watching, these are videos that Dubay still has up, yet he is claiming the final experiment is based on a straw man because he thinks you're stupid. And there's a good chance he's right. Because he goes on to say, the results of the 24-hour observed sun hasn't changed people's minds. Now, this isn't wholly true. There are a lot of globe deniers who are admitting that the stupid Gleason projection map is not a valid basis for a model. Then there are people like Dubay who are claiming they never said it wasn't possible, and others still who are claiming that the Gleason-based model can explain it. He goes on to make the claim of, oh, those globers are attempting to say that looking at a celestial object can tell you about the surface you're on. Now, do any of you globe deniers deny that people in different locations can look at a distant object and through observations discern where they are in relation to each other? measure the change in elevation between points? Of course you don't. Using distant objects, even celestial ones, has always been a method of deciphering the terrain. People like Dubay want to pick and choose when measuring methods are valid, but stop when they invalidate the flat Earth. He then says the participants allegedly traveled to Antarctica.
Now they have allegedly traveled to Antarctica during the southern summer to film the midnight sun, and succeeded in convincing no one.
I find it telling that he still has to say allegedly because apparently he still feels the need to invalidate the trip. Dude, if it was a straw man, then you shouldn't have any problem with it happening. But you know it wasn't a straw man. You know you said there is never a 24-hour sun in any part of Antarctica. He then, once again, says you can't discern the surface by looking at things above, blah, blah, blah. He then asks, why are there more Arctic videos of the 24-hour sun and all the Antarctic ones are fake until now? Which is only partially true. Yes, there are more Arctic videos, but it's only your claim that the Antarctic ones are all fake. And why do you claim that they're fake? Because you have been insisting a 24-hour sun doesn't exist and isn't possible in Antarctica. If the final experiment is based on a straw man, why are you still making the same claims? He then presents his own straw man.
If this is such a common and easily filmed phenomenon, why has it taken this final experiment to finally get footage of it?
No one says this is an easily filmed phenomenon, dude. Antarctica is not easy to travel to. See, one reason there are so many videos of a 24-hour sun in the Arctic, and there's a very simple reason, and I hope I can spell it out plainly enough for you. Listen closely. People fucking live there. Sweden, Norway, Finland, Russia, Alaska, Canada all have populations living in the Arctic Circle and the ability to go to and from there by land. In contrast, people have to go to the Antarctic Circle by air or water. On the average day, there's like 2,500 people on the entire continent. This isn't hard to understand. Next, speaking of not hard to understand, he starts asking nonsense questions about the veracity of the footage of the 24-hour sun. Now, I'm not saying the mere questioning is nonsense. I'm saying the reason he gives for questioning it is nonsense.
Notice the extreme change in shadow length that takes place as McToon from the final experiment paces around the base camp. In the space of walking no more than 10 to 20 meters, while the sun is still quite high overhead, his shadow somehow triples in length. This is more what would be expected from a large overhead studio light than a heliocentric sun 93 million miles away.
Now, the reason for this change is not hard to understand if you have a basic understanding of perspective. It has nothing to do with the distance of the light source at all. It's about the position of the object with the shadow and the viewer, in this case, the camera. Now, lucky for us, as I was writing this up, there was a break in the clouds here in Oakland. So I quickly walked over to a local park and placed this pylon that was there in the sun so we could see its shadow. There's the sun. Now watch as I start kind of close to the object with it to the right of the sun in my frame so the shadow falls to the right. Now, as the pylon crosses the center of frame, the shadow does as well. As the camera moves farther away, the shadow gets smaller. Lastly, the pylon draws closer to the camera and goes past it as the camera turns to watch, and man, oh man, look how long the shadow looks now. Again, just the sun, the camera, and the math of perspective. These shadows might be caused by studio lights. Dumbass. He then repeats the long since disproven claim about water not being curved. about no measured curvature and lights overhead not being used to give info about the ground. By the way, this image being used, it's telling. I think it should be titled The Menace of Education. You have a child saying, "This is what it looks like to me. The sun and moon are equal." Meanwhile, the teacher is berating the child with equations and measurements and data. Oh, the horror. Let us just be naive children who look at the surface and know deeper. Stop menacing us with the data and the logical conclusions that come from that data. Criminy, I'm only halfway through this video. Dubay then claims that the flat Earth has had models that explain the 24-hour sun.
The flat Earth community has long had models that explain a 24-hour sun in Antarctica, including Lady Blunt and Albert Smith's model in their 19th century book, Zetetic Astronomy.
Now, maybe Dubay doesn't expect you to read what's on the screen, but I did. This doesn't speak of a model that can explain a 24-hour Antarctic sun. It acknowledges that it exists, but specifically questions whether or not they can explain it, stating, "Whether we can explain these facts is another question." I'm struck by the fact that you knew that one of the sources you regularly lift your ideas from, Eric, was aware of the 24-hour sun in Antarctica over 100 years ago. Yet you claimed it never happens repeatedly. And even in this very video where you say flat earthers have had a model for years, you are trying to cast doubt on its existence. Flat earthers, can you not see what this man is saying to you? In past videos, he said that a 24-hour sun never happens in Antarctica. In this very video, he's trying to cast doubt on its existence, while simultaneously saying that they've always had models that explain it. What else do you guys need to hear? Okay. He then goes on into a supposed model being made by someone named Joseph Hanvey. I don't know Joseph, I just know he seems to be the new favorite for the globe-denying crowd because people keep sending me links. Now, one thing I said was going to happen with the final experiment is that globe deniers are going to scramble to make up a model that they say explains the 24-hour sun in Antarctica that they claimed was impossible. Well, this is their guy. He's made a model that doesn't explain shit, but it's cool looking, so they love it. Now, I'm going to make a separate video explaining the obvious flaws of this model, so I'll just touch on things Dubay brings up here. I will note, however, that it's a model based on a Gleason projection, which just doesn't work. As this guy, I think his name's Flat Earth Early Bird, says.
Look at the disk map that we know that is like the icon for a flat Earth. Yeah, well, there are issues with it. Primarily, it's not the scale. Yeah, the scale's inconsistent, which means that map is not an accurate representation of the terrain.
But in his model, Hanvey is using a two-way mirror to demonstrate a superfluid ceiling inside a dome over a flat Earth map. That, it seems, along with a generous dose of magic, is enough to make the flat Earth model work. What I don't get is why they go through all this instead of just saying God uses his magic to make it happen. Because so much of the science they try to push requires magic anyway in order to work. You'll see what I mean in a moment.
As the sun circles its way from the Tropic of Cancer to the equator and outwards beyond, there is only one spotlight appearing in the sky.
So how many spotlights did you see? Let's ignore the fact that the sun doesn't appear like a spotlight at all, but in that shot, how many lights do you see in the sky? Look at this next bit.
But as the flashlight widens its circuit outwards towards the Tropic of Capricorn, suddenly a second apparent projected sun appears and begins circling the opposite direction over and around Antarctica. Not only this, but since the projection is only apparent, it is based on the position of the observer.
Now, unless the entirety of the dome is currently in the camera's field of view, that light is not going all the way around Antarctica on that Gleason map. That's just going back and forth over the same spot of sky. And if you tilt up the camera, you would see the sun directly, not just the reflection. This is where the magic comes in. The superfluid, which has properties you've made up, will only allow light to be seen in a special pattern, it seems. Now, in case you thought I was wrong, the camera moves showing that no, the entire map is not in the field of view, and yes, that light is only going back and forth over the same area of sky. And by the way, this shot is taken from the other side of the Earth from the dome that the sun is reflecting off of. That sun is not in the sky above us. It's in the sky over them and is just going back and forth in our field of view. Dubay then speculates on the magical properties of the dome and its unknown superfluid that God has decided to use. He has images of sundogs and lens reflections as examples of how God's magic somehow, occasionally, is not doing its job. He has an animation of Shane St. Pierre's so-called model, which he took from Walter Bislin, that, again, without explanation, shows the magical properties required and, again, is based on a map that is a projection of a globe, stating,
Our eyes create an apparent sky dome, as shown here. Each person has their own unique sky dome perspective based on where and when they are observing from.
Just say it's magic, people.
We know this to be true from the fact that 3 people in 3 different locations will observe the same sun appearing differently.
Fucking hell. That's just how vision works. If I have 2 other people in this room looking at this screen in front of me, we would all see the same screen from different angles and it would appear differently. That's how point of view works. We don't all need a personal magic bubble showing the screen to us. He then goes back to Hanvey's model, where he claims that depending on your point of view, in this model you would see a clockwise or a counterclockwise motion of the stars. I'll point this out more clearly in the video specifically about Hanvey's model, but what we see here is 2 clusters of stars moving in the same direction, which really isn't a problem because this point of view is looking southward at a high angle and seeing a cluster of stars in the distance. And the foreground, according to the flat model, is also a southern-facing surface on the dome. Nothing we see here is looking north. Then he shows a view of how the star trails would look to those looking north, and then a view looking southward in the model. The problem is, those are the same stars in the southern view as in the northern view, shown a few seconds prior. And none of those points of view are from inside the dome looking up at the sky in any direction. Dubay then shows some footage of the Earth from a high-altitude balloon using a fisheye lens that distorts the shape of the horizon in order to claim that the horizon is flat. Lastly, Dubay's video closes with this exchange.
I would put it to you like this. If there's a dome, if we're in an enclosed system, does that not mean that there are a whole lot of variables that we don't know about that could affect the lights in the ceiling?
Yeah, I can grant that.
What Hanvey is saying here is if there is a dome, we have to concede to a great number, an unknown number of unknown factors that would have to come into play in order for a dome to work. In other words, this model does not work unless we assume a lot of unknown stuff. The part I refer to as magic. The globe, however, explains it all. All of it. Flat earthers like to claim Occam's razor, saying the simplest argument is the correct one and the simplest explanation for the Earth appearing flat is because it's flat. But no, Occam's razor is better realized as, between 2 equally valid explanations, the one with fewer unknown variables should be pursued. Now, I wouldn't call them equally valid, but the globe model explains everything we observe. Everything. And we know why. But their so-called model?
If there's a dome, if we're in an enclosed system, does that not mean that there are a whole lot of variables that we don't know about?
Globe wins.
Flawless victory. Fatality.
That's my job! That's what I do! I don't lose! I win! Is there no one on this planet to even challenge me?
Maybe you came by to congratulate me on last night's victory.